So, welcome everyone to this blab. My name's Cara Lambert, and with me I have Kellie O'Brien, who is a PR expert here in Australia. I was first introduced to Kellie through her mastermind workshop, her mastermind Facebook group, and Kellie has opened my eyes to a number of different women here in Australia. For example, Kylie Patchett, Angela Raspis, and Victoria Gibson, quite incredible female entrepreneurs and coaches. So, Kellie, what I was going to do, although I've got a great introduction for you, I would rather that you introduce yourself to the people watching at the moment.
Oh, sure. Okay. I guess I'm what I call a storytelling coach. And what I do is work with PR, social media. Is there an echo, or is that just me?
I can't hear an echo, but sometimes putting headphones on often gets rid of that.
Yeah, I might try that. I had them handy just in case. So I work with small businesses and entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, helping them put together their social media and their PR and their digital marketing to help them leverage their brand. And a big part for me is also automating your system so that you're not creating more work than you need to. So trying to create some more ease in your business. And I guess I started out doing what I'm doing now because I used to, former journalist. I had 16 years as a newspaper journalist and also had a radio segment as well. And when I went on maternity leave, I was asked, I started a mum blog after having had a column in the newspaper about being a mum and all the weird things that happened to you and your baby during that time, all the strange things that happened to your body. And I was asked a lot about that when I went on maternity leave, why isn't it continuing? So I started a mum blog, having no idea really what a blog was, just playing around. And within a couple of months, I had a business ask me whether I could help them with their PR. And I said, I don't do that sort of thing, and I know nothing about PR. It's not my area, not my area. I'm a journalist. And this lady was quite persistent. So in the end, I gave in and helped her. And then, of course, she went and recommended me to a whole heap of people. And the next thing, I had a business, and I never went back to journalism. So it's kind of snowballed from there. And then having a blog and doing social media for the business has obviously attracted those clients. So 5 years or 6 years down the track, that's how I've arrived at where I am. It was a happy accident, and I'm glad that I stumbled into it because it's exciting, and I love the world of entrepreneurship. So.
Yeah, I love these happy accidents. They certainly open up your eyes to a number of different things. So what I asked you on the blab for was to talk about media and not, the traditional forms of media, so radio, print, rather than social media marketing, because I don't know if anyone's been around blab for any length of time, not necessarily as long as I have, they would know that there are a lot of people on here talking about social media. And I think at this point in time, the traditional media outlets are actually becoming forgotten. So I wanted to talk to you about that, as with your background in journalism and in PR. So particularly today. So I've got a couple of questions for you, and just to let you guys know, Kellie does have the questions, so she's not, I'm not going to bring anything on her. So the first question I want to ask you was, what three major errors do businesses make when pitching to media outlets?
Good question. There's so many, but three major areas. I guess one is not actually having a strong story hook to start with. And a lot of businesses, as a journalist, they used to pitch what they call their birthday. Only people have birthdays, but the anniversary of their business. And they'd pitch that as a story angle, and that's not a story angle unless you are celebrating 100 years, which I'm guessing none of you are celebrating 100 years for your business unless you're a mega brand that's been passed down the generations. So a trend that's happening within your niche or your business, or an annual event that's happening. Of course, we've got Christmas coming up. There's plenty of angles you can hook into there, and New Year's resolutions and all those things that if you can find, it's not just finding those stories, but actually finding the twist on those stories, because everybody else is pitching a Christmas story right now, and everybody else is pitching a New Year's resolution story now. So how can you make that different? You know, find that little twist. And I guess, as you know, Cara, I created the PR news calendar so that people could actually have 12 months of story hooks that they could use to be able to come up with pitches ongoing rather than just one-off pitches. Yeah. So for me, it's the area that most people really struggle with. And yeah, so that would be my first one. The next one is probably pitching the editor rather than a journalist who's actually interested in your niche or topic. So pitching the wrong person. The editor is looking more at high-level stuff within the business and within the newsroom and within the newspaper itself, or radio or TV, whatever it happens to be. Whereas a journalist is, one of the roles of a journalist is to actually go out and come into, not every media organisation works like this, but most of them work with a morning conference where they have to come in with a set number of stories. Okay. If you hand them an awesome story, you've just done their work for them. So if you pitch the right journalist, then they will love you, and it's a big tick. The other thing is probably, and sorry, I've just realised that I've probably misinterpreted the question. It was more around pitching. But another thing that people do wrong or do incorrectly when they are trying to get media attention is not actually capturing traffic once that comes to their website. So after you've done the interview, it's all well and good to have a media outlet that sends you 10,000 people to your website. But if it doesn't result in growing your email list or actually in sales, then what was the point in the first place? So for me, brand awareness isn't enough. It's not what generates income. You need to actually have a pathway for people to follow once they actually arrive at your website. So that's the three things, I guess I see that people do incorrectly when they're doing media.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the calendar because, and Kellie specifically mentioned it to me because I have been actually using it, and it's quite useful with the hooks that you can bring into your marketing throughout the year. And, you can use it across the different platforms, not just with the traditional media formats. So talking about that different media formats, do you feel that the pitches that you need to give as a business owner, do they have to be different depending on whether you're trying to get into the print media or radio or television?
The way that you pitch doesn't change, but the content of the pitch should be different. You'll see some PR. So I come very much from a journalist background, not a PR background. And a lot of PRs will tell you to mass pitch 20 media outlets with the exact same press release or the exact same hook. And media outlets want something different than the next person, particularly if you're doing local media and the radio and the newspaper and the TV are all doing the same story. They all want a different hook. So you need to find a different twist that relates to them. Or pitch at different times. Try the newspaper first, and if they don't respond to your pitch, then tweak that pitch and then try again with a radio station. So it's about giving them all something unique. They're not going to put you on the front page of the newspaper if you're pitching everybody, because why is anyone going to buy their newspaper when that story's already been on radio and TV?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, is that you have to realise that what's in it for me for the media outlet, and they want the exclusivity, they want the sales or the advertising opportunity. So I like the fact that, you have to remember not to do this blanket kind of blanket approach to all of the outlets. So
that's right. And I think you've got to think about, it's got to be a three-way win when you pitch a newspaper. It's got to be a win for the journalist, and it's got to be an exciting and interesting story for them to write about. If it's boring, it will take them forever to try and write. Think about your own blog. When you write a blog post, if you start delving into a topic that doesn't excite you, it takes you forever to write it. Yeah. And when you delve into a topic that you're really passionate about and you love, it just flows, and they want that story. The other win is for the reader. So a media outlets is exactly like we are. They're trying to get as much traffic as they can, as much circulation, as many listeners, as many readers, as many viewers as they can. So it has to be a win for the media, for the reader as well, that they actually want to consume and want to read your story or listen to your interview, because it's exciting and it's interesting and it relates to them. So it's got to be a win for them, which is a bit of a double win, because it's a win for the journalist as well, as far as increasing their audience. And it's got to be a win for you. There's no point pitching a story about how so, for example, on Source Bottle this morning, which for those outside of Australia is our equivalent of Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, which is where media outlets will go and look for talent, for their stories. And there was something about have you moved states, interstate or internationally at the moment? And for me, that's my story at the moment. I've just moved from Tasmania to Wollongong. But there's nothing in that I can tie in that relates to my business. So there's no point me pitching that, because it's not a win for me. It's just me helping them out, and I don't get anything in return. So it's got to be a win for you. It's got to be wrapped around your business or your story or your message, or, whatever your why is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Do you think there's still a place for print media with everyone moving online? I mean, even the newspapers have their websites where they distribute a lot of their articles, especially their top articles. Do you think they still have a place?
Oh, most definitely. I think traditional media, as you said, and now have an online presence, which means you can get a double whammy. When you pitch traditional media, they will also, if your story is strong enough, put you online as well. And some of their social media platforms are massive. They have massive audiences. So it is well worth doing it, because you can get some offline and offline in one go. There's also something called News Now, which is particularly Fairfax newspapers around Australia are adopting across the board, which is getting news online faster and trying to get news uploaded to online sources. So most newspaper circulations are going down. There are some my husband will differ. He's a newspaper editor. His circulation is going up, but there are places where most newspaper circulations are going down. But I would never ever discount doing newspapers because of the platform they have. And I guess the other thing is what media you choose comes down to two factors. So one is where is your ideal client hanging out? And if you don't know, then you need to work with a coach or whoever to actually determine who that person is and where is the best place to be targeting. If your ideal client, for example, gets up in the morning, they check Facebook at 7 o'clock, they read the newspaper while they're having their breakfast in the morning, then the newspaper and Facebook are two areas that you need to be targeting. So you really need to know who your ideal client is. And the second one is they can provide some credibility through media cluster badges, which are those little clusters of media logos that people have on their website. So if you had two businesses offering the same product at the same price, and you're very similar type of people, then they're going to go with the one that they feel they have the most, that they feel is most trustworthy. And so a third-party endorsement from the media does that. So if you went to two websites, they're the same, and one has a media cluster badge, you tend to go with the one with the media cluster badge.
Yeah, that's a good point, that for businesses to remember the ability to have that media badge on their websites, and that it is a leverageable resource for you. Now, you mentioned that your husband is the editor of a regional newspaper. Do you see there's a difference in the usability of, or the use of, print media in metropolitan, local and rural papers? Like, do you see that rural papers have a bigger pool than metropolitan papers? I hope you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I do. Again, it comes down to your ideal client. If they're not reading the Herald Sun, for example, there's no point pitching there, unless you want it for a media cluster badge for your website. If you want to pitch Sunrise Morning Show or the Today Show, if your ideal client's not watching that, unless you want it for a media cluster, for your media cluster, then there's not much point pitching there. If your ideal client is reading the local newspaper and it's a weekly newspaper, then that's going to have far more power for you than going for a national newspaper.
Yeah.
So yeah, it always comes back to the ideal client. I say it so often, so people get sick of me saying
no,
it.
and I'm exactly the same. I feel exactly the same about ideal client definitions and values. I feel like people hear me say it all the time. So, but they are powerful tools to have as a business owner. So you talk about the media cluster badge. What role does social media then play in media outlets researching your business and making a decision as to whether or not to use your story?
Yeah, I think this really depends on the story to whether a journalist needs to do some background research on you. They do want to know that you're credible. And most of them will go, journalists and bloggers will go and Google you before they decide to interview you. If you Googled yourself right now, what do you find?
Yep.
And, you know, when they search your keywords, do you come up? So if they're doing a story on, you know, social media in South Australia, for example, I'll take you for as an example. If they Googled that, do you come up on the front page of Google? And if you do, then, and this is not when you pitch, this is just being discovered by a journalist, that if they're looking for a social media expert, I know I hate that term, but, you know, a social media expert in South Australia, and they Google that and you come up on the front page of Google, then they're more likely to go with whoever's on the front page to quote them for their story. So there is that benefit as far as them researching to find their own talent. And then the opposite, of course, is if you pitch and they want to know you're credible. So some will research to see whether, one, you're credible. Some will research to gain some more insights before they actually do an interview with you. So make sure that what you specialize in is actually blog content on your blog. And some will think your story is hot enough just to jump on it right then and there, and they don't have time for research. They just want to get the story out, and that's where you want to be. Yeah, I would go and Google yourself and find out, and go in and look at your own social media platforms to see what message that you're projecting and what image that you're projecting. You know, it's sometimes the simple things like, do you have a proper professional image as your bio image, rather than a selfie that's, you know, at an angle and, you know, or you know, the whole, that's, you know what I mean. It needs to look professional. Do you have engagement on your social media? If you know, or is it tumbleweeds? They can tell the website, the businesses that have 10,000 followers and 0 engagement. It says that there's something not right there. There's a disconnect. So they will then question whether or not you're credible. You can have then 2 or 3 or 500 followers and a really engaged social media platform, and that's going to have more weight than the 10,000 and 0 engagement. So it comes to, it's exactly like a customer coming and sussing you out and seeing whether or not they want to buy from you. They're going to go and do a bit of research. They're going to look at your website. Does it look professional? They'll go and look at your social media. Does it look like, you know, you're projecting something that's not?
Yeah. Oh, that's certainly good advice for businesses to lift their profiles before they try to get out there into the media land, and it will have the reverse benefit of, should the journalist be looking for something to pitch in those morning conferences, that you're going to be appearing higher.
Yes.
So speaking of media and media cluster badges, sorry, I have to keep referring to that term. Looking down, it's not familiar, but I know exactly what you mean. Oddly enough, I've seen them. So what's the benefit of having a media pack available for people looking to use your services? Or interview. Yeah.
So it's a good idea to try and create a media page if you can, if you want to encourage more interviews. And one of them, as I just said, they're going to research you, and if they can go to your website and find everything, then you've done their job for them. So you've made it a lot easier for them to say yes to you as opposed to yes to someone else that they may have discovered. Also, there's certain media outlets. Some media outlets will actually love for you to have a top 10 questions that they can ask you. So you can actually do a top 10 questions that they could possibly ask you. And radio particularly will do that. Newspapers might be more offended if you offered that to them. They want to do their own.
You tell them how to do their job.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You also definitely need a 200 or 300 DPI JPEG image. So that was 200 or 300 DPI JPEG image of yourself, ready for them to use for publication. Now, many newspapers will actually come, if they want to do a story on you, they'll go and create and get a photographer to take a photo of you. So they can do it in their own style and do their own image. But if things are pushing deadline and they need a photo quickly, then they want something that's professional. Don't do anything, a dodgy image of yourself. It's got to be a professional looking image, and it's got to be high res. Otherwise they won't run it. And that can mean you get a bigger space if you've got that image to go with it. If you're running an event, for example, then you might want to have a fact sheet there, and you might want a press release that gives a bit more information about the event itself. But the more you can provide them, pretty much, the easier you make their job. And that's what it comes down to.
I like that idea. It's about making their job easier, not harder, because you're going to them for some help. So you're going to want to make things easier for the journalist. So, so we spoke earlier about Source Bottle and Haro. What are your tips for using those platforms?
Number one tip, and probably the most important tip, is respond quickly. Some journalists will get hundreds and hundreds of responses, and they'll pretty much cannot be bothered going through hundreds of responses, so they'll only go through the first couple. So try and be one of the first to get in. Only provide the information they ask for. There are people who actually go out there, will find a media call out and then pitch a completely different story. You need to stick to what they're asking for and give them exactly what they want, so don't go off topic. And also ensure, probably another second most important thing, is to ensure that the contact details that you provide are the contact details that you can respond to quickly. Do not give your home phone number if you're going to be working in another business, in your office, for example, on a completely different number all day, and don't get the message until 6 o'clock that night. You'll just miss the opportunity. They don't have time to wait for you. They need to jump on quickly. So if you're going to give your mobile number, make sure your mobile's beside you. It's charged. It's on. It's really important to do that. So that's probably my 3 tips for doing call outs is really to be quick, to make sure that you actually give them what they've asked, that they wanted. Make it interesting as well. Tell them who you are and why they should be listening to you. But lastly, giving the contact details that's easiest for them to be able to respond to you.
I think being quick is an interesting thing. Having looked at Source Bottle a few times, a lot of them have, a 2-week time period that they're going to accept pitches in, and but realistically, the quicker you can get to the journalist, the better it is, not just for yourself but for them as well. Because the sooner they can get to market with their story, the happier they'll be.
Exactly, and that can depend on the type of media and what they're putting out there. So sometimes you can tell that there's a certain story that's going to get masses of responses. You may notice other ones that get put up a couple of times, which means that they probably haven't found what they're looking for, or they're not getting very many responses. So you probably have a higher chance there of getting through. I have seen a couple lately that have been nearly every day, so it's either running accidentally or they're actually really seeking some
different answer.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe they need to rethink their question.
That's right. Yes.
So the thing that gets me is, with a quick response, and is sound bites. How important, or what is the power of a sound bite for a journalist? And if you explain what a sound bite is for those people that don't understand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. So in newspaper land, we actually call them quotable quotes. And in radio and TV, they'll call them sound bites. So journalists want a story with colour, pretty much. And what that means is it's a 10 to 30 second piece of what you say that sums something up in a way that's memorable. So you've got to think of sound bites as emotional rather than fact-based. So how can you put some emotion into something? So inside my Publicity Alchemy course, I actually go through this 10 different types of sound bites that I've come up with that you can use. But I'm just going to give you 2 examples just because it's easier to explain with examples. Sure. So, for example, one is, similes, metaphors, and analogies. And an example is, this is not a media one, this is actually a blog one, but Derek Halpern from Social Triggers used a soundbite in a blog post in reference to website font sizes, and his quote was, "Size 14 is the new size 12," which I thought was very clever.
It is very
memorable.
Clever.
It's memorable. It gets people. And that's probably another way to think about it from those who are more social media minded. What is tweetable? That is a soundbite. Is what's tweetable. Another one is pop culture, and this is more political and more to the US, but former Governor Mike Huckabee assessing his chances at becoming Mitt Romney's vice presidential running mate in 2012. He said, "There's a greater likelihood that I'll be asked by Madonna to go on tour as her bass player than I'll be picked on the ticket." So I just think sometimes it can be a bit fun. It can have a bit of a twist at the end of it. It might be a rhetorical question. There's lots of different types that you can use, but it's something that has a bit of emotion to it. It gets people, laughing, crying, thinking, whatever it is. That, so have a bit of fun with it. But as I said, a journalist wants colour. They don't want all bland stuff. And sometimes your soundbite is what ends up being the headline of the story as well, because it's that thing that they can hook into. And as a journalist, when you get back to the office, that's the thing you jump up and down about. "Oh my goodness, I got the most amazing quotable quote. Listen to this," and you tell everyone in the office because it sounded so good. So sometimes it's crafting those before you go into a interview. Sometimes they just happen, that you're in the middle of an interview and the journalist asks the right question and you blurt something out that is just spot on, and you can see their eyes light up.
Yes. And thank you for including that, because my next question was, are you better placed actually thinking of those kinds of things beforehand? So is there a better or worse time of year for pitching to the media, considering we're coming into Christmas and the States are coming into Thanksgiving?
Not really. It kind of depends on your business and the media outlet that you're pitching. So there can be an argument for and against any time of year, really. So it is going to come down to the type of business that you're pitching. So, for example, and I know we've talked about this in my Media Mastermind Facebook group, Cara, but, January is a slow month in Australia because so many people are on holidays and journalists are actually scrambling to find good stories. So you can get an easy win in January. It comes down, as I said, to what your business does and when it comes to the fore as to how easy it is to get media attention. So, for example, when you're talking about Christmas, it's really easy for a business in Australia who has a seafood business or a poultry business or a gift wrapping business or anything that's tied to Christmas and eating and food. That's an easy win for them. But for you and I trying to do a business story, it might be really, really hard because they've got other focuses on. With, for example, what's just happened with the Paris attacks, the media outlets are focused on that and they're filling their pages with Paris-related stories. Unless you can tie into that, you have a hook that's related to it, and be really careful when you do that. There's a little hope of you getting in when that happens. So if you have a campaign and you're about to launch it and a worldwide or a national media disaster happens, hold off. It's just not worth trying to get in because you're competing with something that's completely consuming their focus and consuming the world's focus as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was living in the States on September 11th and for weeks the media was consumed with it. So businesses wouldn't have had a hope of getting any launches out during that period of time. So I definitely agree with you on that one. I think we touched on this before in your 3 tips that we spoke about. Are you better off pitching to the editor or a subject journalist? And I think you said, you're better off pitching to the journalist because the editor is looking more broadly at the aims of the outlet rather than
Yeah.
the stories in particular.
Spot on. And I guess if you can't get to a journalist, then the next best option in for newspapers particularly is the chief of staff. And the chief of staff is the person who will take all the phone calls of the stories coming in if they're not directed specifically at a journalist. And then they'll then hand those stories out to journalists who need more stories to fill up their quota for that particular day. So the chief of staff would be your next best bet. I would leave the editor as the very last resort. Again, it comes down to the size of the newspaper. There are, a weekly newspaper might have a journalist and an editor. That might be all they have. So it might be okay to pitch the editor in that respect, in that instance. But the bigger the media outlet, the less chance you're going to get through to the editor unless you have a relationship with the editor. And you build a relationship. So my husband, for example, has people in the community who will ring him on his mobile and give him stories direct. And they generally tend to be people with front page type stories, or he's built a relationship with them outside of the newspaper. But I would always look for, and not just any journalist either, but actually a journalist that's interested in what you're doing. And you can do that by just going through the media outlet. And with most stories online, you can do searches to find out if they've done stories on your topic before and find that journalist, because that's a trigger that they're more likely to be interested in your story than the journalist who's sitting next to them that's doing health-related stories when you want to do a business-related story. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's the questions that I had. But what we've got is Walter's put in a quote, and I don't know, Walter's is still in the room actually. So he said a great way to get customers and followers is to have a quiz page and get them engaged, asking them questions they can interact with. Then have an opt-in and say, if you enjoyed this and want to read more, then sign up for my newsletter. I think that's a great way of getting harnessing the power of the PR that you've received.
Definitely. Now, there's lots of different things. I would just make sure that looking at, if you're about to get media attention, making sure that the latest blog post you have on there is relevant to what you've been talking about in the media, making sure there is a call to action on your homepage, because that's likely where they're going to be going unless the media outlet allows you the ability to give away a free gift, which is your opt-in. If you're allowed to do that, in some cases your product might actually be the focus of the story. So one of the other tips that I would say is make sure that it's easy for them to find it. If they have to click through 5 different pages to find the product that you've been talking about, they'll give up and go away. And the journalist will then see that the journalist will then end up getting calls from people saying, I really wanted to buy this thing and I can't find it. Can you help me? That journalist is going to get really, really irritated and never want to do a story on you again. So make sure that people can actually, find whatever you're promoting easily.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions in there, or are there any other tips that you think that people might like to hear, Kellie? I think we've covered off on a lot of them.
Yeah, I think you've done most of them. Something did trigger a while ago, but now it's gone again. So
that's all right. That's actually the reason why I have some paper and a pen. You never know what's going to come up in the lab discussions. All right. So if people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Yes, you can
that over in the chat.
Go to www.Kellie OBrien, Kellie is IE, as you can see on the screen, .com.au for Australia. So you can find me there, or Facebook is facebook.com/Kellie O'Brien AU as well. And Twitter is also, which I think you can see through the side there, is Kellie O'Brien AU. Bit of a consistency there. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and on my website. And I pretty much sharing there. And a lot of what's on my website at the moment is, what do you do once the traffic gets there? How do you actually create a client pathway that takes people from landing on your website to actually through to buying what you have to offer? Because as I said, brand awareness is lovely, but it doesn't always result in revenue, and you need to be clever and strategic about what you're doing.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for your time, Kellie.
Not a problem.